let's talk about this new production. Let's talk about how it differs from other indoor productions. And let's start by addressing what you thought when Dan Brown and Tony D approach you and say, hey, we've got this idea, and it kind of involves some cubes.
Yeah, well, automation in these spectacles now has become quite the challenge to push the envelope, to immerse the audience into the show. And how do we make it look elegant? How do we deliver content in a way that doesn't upstage the performance but allows a really nice supplemental eye candy? But the whole concept of the automation winches, it's just the next evolution of what can you do with video, what can you do with winches, how can you make these things just a little bit cooler and a little bit more elegant than anybody else has done with them, you know? And there's a couple things out there that have predated what we're doing here, and this is now like the granddaddy of what's happening out there. You push the envelope. We have a very heavy show here, and we have dynamic loading. So when I say that means when all those things are moving, it's putting a bigger stress on the roofs of these buildings. Right? You have to look at the worst case scenario in a show. We have 52 cubes right now. Each one of those cubes weighs about 500 pounds. Just the cube. That's without the rigging that's hanging them, right? So roughly at any given time, if all of them are moving very quickly at once, it's 20,000 pounds of weight. If, God forbid, somebody has to hit an E-stop to stop them for whatever reason, it just puts a big dynamic load on the building. So you start to just think about the PA, the rigging, the lights. There's a pile of stuff. How's that weight distributed over the roof? What are all the scenarios of the buildings that you're going to? And it's very difficult because in Europe, buildings have a little less capacity, maybe a little lower ceiling space, what we call trim. So it's very hard to build the biggest spectacle that you can build, but also build it for maybe the worst case scenario of the smallest building on the tour. It's interesting because you design a show around what's the most clever way to deliver content and how do you keep the audience happy. And what you end up having is you have the least amount of time to actually integrate the content into the machine, because we've only been here for a little while. And so of all that timeline of the beginning and when you start to kind of figure out what all the elements are, and then when you get to actually build it, you have this little bitty tiny time at the end where you actually get to open your toys on Christmas morning and play with them and integrate the content in the machine. And that's a tough time because you never have enough time. It's actually really interesting for me to see the whole evolution, right? From the very first phone call to the very first sketch to here we are in a building with a bunch of stuff.
Right. Are there like 52 cubes that get loaded onto a truck and brought in like that, or
they ride in very special dollies. I mean, the video that's on there is like, I think it's 5mm high-res LED panels that are quite fragile. So it's all about the packaging, and then there's lights inside of them, and then there's 2.2 miles of wire cable that goes up to the winches.
2.2 miles?
Yeah, that actually, yo-yos them up and down.
Right. Okay. So, and how long does it take on average? Do you know how long it takes on average to load those in and out?
Well, we've only done it once.
How long did it take?
It takes as long as you got.